Super.
All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. So, this live today is brought to you by 12 Weeks to Wellness. So, we are a coaching company for health and wellness and nutrition and has been for over 20 years now. So, my name is Emma Carpenter and I'm the president of 12 Weeks to Wellness. And I'm thrilled to welcome my guest today, global care expert Dave Levine. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you.
So Dave has spent his career in EAP and wellness with Hazelden, HIA, Aetna, Magellan, ComPsych, and Optum United Health. I'll let some people in here. Master of Social Work by training. Dave's experience is both in the operations and the customer side of the field, and for the last 16 years has focused primarily outside the US. So Dave is also the founder of Global Care Expert, a global crisis response and counseling firm with partners in 75 countries. Great to have you here, Dave, today.
Happy to be
So
here.
today we are going to explore how we can elevate employee well-being on a global scale. So Dave is here to share some practical strategies for how we can navigate different cultural nuances, what it looks like across the world, regulatory differences, and the unique needs of diverse teams when implementing well-being programs, in this case, EAPs. So let's just dive in there, Dave. So, what are some of the biggest differences that you see between EAP services in North America and those provided in other regions?
It's a good place to start. I'd say 80% of the services are similar around the globe. Basic intake, promotion of the program, delivery of counseling services, oftentimes ancillary legal, financial, other kinds of services related to psychosocial health. But the 20% that's different is a very important 20%. And if you don't pay attention to those differences, it doesn't set the program up well for success. The differences are typically the availability of social work and psychologist staff or network, and related costs. It's sort of supply and demand. If there's very few providers available, you're going to end up paying more for them. And they may or may not have a workplace orientation. They may be good clinically, but not have the EAP mindset of sort of two clients in mind, the individual client and the corporate client. The costs vary considerably. We're just talking about your homeland in Sweden, and the cost of living is very high, and related the psychology counseling services are also very high. Over $100 an hour for a provider. On the other hand, you take India or the Philippines, very low cost, comparatively low cost countries. So the cost of provision of services and the related support aspects, promoting the services are a lot less expensive. So looking for a global program for a multinational employer that works around the globe, you're oftentimes, they don't want to pay a different rate by headcount in every country. So you're getting a weighted average to come up with a cost that's going to be easy to manage, and the provider's not going to go broke, go underwater with that cost, and the employer is going to be able to predict a budget in order to make that cost.
Yeah, and I guess there'll be a difference as well in how the social systems are set up as well, which will impact how much is the organization paying for and the insurance paying for, as opposed to what needs to be paid for by the individual. Looks very different across the world as well, and that's going to impact
Exactly
the
right.
cost as well. Yeah.
The national health care makes a huge difference, and oftentimes behavioral health isn't covered in the national health care programs, or even the supplemental private health care supplements to the national health care. Even very sophisticated employers. We worked with IBM a few years ago, and very sophisticated company, very HR oriented, yet they didn't have a behavioral health in their private healthcare supplement, which is not uncommon around the globe. So as a result, the EAP sees a lot more severe cases. If there's not another resource like the health plan, or like in Canada, good access to behavioral health care, um, the EAP ends up seeing those more severe cases because the rank and file employee is unable to find, identify, or pay for that counseling if they can even get to it. And the EAP ends up seeing a lot of those more severe cases.
Mm.
Yeah. There's some other differences. There's country legislation going on. Japan, for the last 5 or so years, has had a requirement for an annual stress check of employers of over 50 employees, identifying high-risk stress cases and referring them to the EAP. The care is voluntary. An employee doesn't have to accept that referral, but all employees have to take that stress test. Mexico, a few years ago, implemented what they call NOM 35, more psychosocial risk focused trauma and other risks affecting the workplace, and it sort of helped drive EAPs there. Singapore for many years has had incentives for employers in place that put wellness services, offered wellness services, and they subsidized that to an extent, subsidized employers in Singapore providing those wellness services. Philippines also recently implemented what they call RA 1136, I think it is, but the labor and health departments got together to promote mental health. There's not a reimbursement for it yet there, but it's a promotion, a recognition of mental health more than in the past, and promotion of help to get services. Yeah.
So just a little follow-up is so what does it look like in general though when we look at it? Is it generally, I mean, I understand we try to get local providers if possible, but if that's not available and there's a shortage of that, can we, or is it effective in doing more virtual providers that aren't actually necessarily located that, or do we run into issues then?
It's an option. Some suppliers have attempted that, and it's always a trade. And actually, some suppliers that have had previously local provision of care have tried to regionalize care. So offering phone access in a regional way, multi-language access, but not by a local necessarily. The balancing act is the further away you get from firsthand knowledge of the culture, not only the language, but the culture, the mores, the social norms in a particular locale, the further, the tougher it is for employees to relate to them. So it's one thing for somebody in Toronto to call the Philippines for a question on their credit card or tech support for their PC. It's another thing to call it depression or family relationship issues, and you want to be able to relate to that help on the other side of the line. But in a stopgap measure, as a stopgap, it certainly is, virtual counseling certainly is on the uprise, and people are more and more accepting of that.
So how can HR leaders ensure then that global EAP offerings are culturally sensitive and that they resonate with employees across diverse regions? Then what can they do? What are some strategies or what to look for?
Global care is a challenge both for employers and for suppliers. You sort of take for granted the language differences, but we forget about the differences in network, the differences in phone systems, and bringing that together, the differences in promoting those services. It adds up to lack of scale for the providers, lack of scale for employees. So the first thing employers. The first thing an employer can do is sort of run a head count by country. And it's interesting. They'll want a global EAP, but they themselves will not know. It's not unusual for them to not understand where their employees are concentrated. Their whole pursuit or pathway to EAP may be the first time they've tried to globalize a single benefit and add consistency around the globe to this the human side of their benefit plan. So the first thing they can do is just assign people, not just tack it on so somebody's working on the side of the desk and adding on top of their existing responsibilities, but truly assign an FTE or a portion of somebody's job to oversee that. And then once the corporate head, wherever that corporate head is based, to identify, particularly in their higher concentration countries outside of corporate, individual stakeholders that can champion the promotion and the oversight of the care in their country. And it's tougher to do that. The fewer and fewer employees that may be in a country, the less chance it is to identify somebody expert enough or willing enough to oversee the EAP provision. But I think those are the first two basic steps. And then the other is just to make sure the services, of course, they're going to be delivered. The care is going to be accessed and delivered in the language of the local country. But it needs to be promoted in that same language. On-site services need to be promoted similarly, not just in the default English. We often hear that, well, the company business language is English and all their employees are comfortable with that. But again, when they're bringing forth a relationship issue or depression, or their family members at home may not be at all fluent in English, it's important to default to the local language of the country and not English. I think importantly for employers, they can also ask for reports to be broken out by country, preserving confidentiality, of course, but broken out by country. So they know utilization, they understand utilization in how their country is doing compared to other countries. They may even add survey questions to their annual survey to assess the level of awareness of workplace counseling and wellness services.
Do we know what that utilization tends to look like across the globe? Does it vary a lot depending on?
Well, compared to the US
access?
and Canada, it certainly does. Canada, we see probably among the highest utilization, 10%, 8 to 10% average annual utilization is not uncommon. In the States, I think it's closer to 6 or 7%. And that average is more down around 2 or 3% internationally. Of course, that varies by company and level of promotion and how involved the local reps are in promoting the program. But I'd say 2 to 3% is a better average outside North America.
Is it also then related to the fact that you might get more severe cases, that the level of care is different of what the offerings are? So you don't have as much maybe of those preventative services offered, but more intervening with more acute
With
matters?
more severe problems. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
One of the remedies. Yeah.
So it's not as broad. Yeah. So what are some strategies that we can use then to implement to assess how effective the global EAP services are then and continuously improve them?
Yeah. Medtronic is a great example. They've got a legacy from Ed Shimoleski to Doug Fiola to Linda Cass to Lisa Dow and currently Gene Hermes. Leading their program internally. And these are all clinicians and experts in their field, and they know how to manage vendors. It's just not a benefit manager or an HR manager trying to do their best to understand the ins and outs of EAP and the product offerings and the lately integrated wellness offerings. So they're truly expert folks, and being a good example like that, they can hold suppliers responsible. They can also get words of support from their leadership to sort of testimonials for their leaderships to provide support for the EAP and encourage its confidentiality, its privacy, its professionalism, and encourage employees to use that. But measuring the programs, it really depends what the purpose of the program was put in place to start with. If it's productivity, if it's engagement, if it's medical offset, medical cost offset. But there's lots of tools. Say the purpose was to improve the overall health, then one of the measurements the company may choose to use is a health risk assessment. And there are some good multi-language health risk assessments out there. Wellness Checkpoint, actually a Canadian-based company based in Winnipeg now, part of
Carebook.
Carebook. Yeah. They have a great HRA in place for 20 years. Zoriana Highwarren developed that, and it remains, in my view, sort of the gold standard in measuring lifestyle, diabetes, smoking, heart issues, nutrition, and that reflection, that health risk assessment is a different way for an EAP to serve, but it can also promote a lot of utilization when somebody identifies depression through a self-help inventory that they just took and sees a high risk for depression or anxiety. It oftentimes that self-help HRA or health risk assessment will lead to participation in the program.
Yeah, it's a good triage tool too for coaching and counseling.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
There's a global measure in place called the WOS, the Work Outcomes Suite, measuring more productivity, absenteeism, presenteeism. It's a free tool. Any EAP can use that, but it's been accepted by many EAPs, and it's another good tool. Some EAPs are using the PHQ-9, a depression inventory, sort of pre and post, to see movement on that. Others use Net Promoter Score, NPS, to look at client satisfaction. If engagement is the culture, a culture of health, an engaged workforce, are these days measures that many companies are pursuing. They'll often do a separate engagement survey. Gallup's got a good one, and of course they're probably the most known, but many other providers or the company themselves may develop their own engagement survey to assess that.
Mm-hmm. So we've tapped into this topic and just feel like we've just skimmed the surface, but you've given so much value already. But where can we learn more about global EAP?
I just returned from Istanbul for a meeting of the Employee Assistance European Forum, EAEF.org, for anybody interested in that. And together with a peer, the Asia Pacific Employee Assistance Roundtable, this year we're doing a global summit in Istanbul. We were there for our winter board meeting, but we were there because that's the site of our conference next May. So let me steer anybody listening to Employee Assistance Summit.world or EASummit.world for more information on that. It's going to be a great resource. That's May 27th through 31st in Istanbul. But the two organizations that support that, appear.org and EAEF.org, along with US-based EPA, a larger organization who every year is getting more internationally focused. I see Charles there most of their annual conferences. They're becoming more, they had an international panel of the two presidents of EAEF and Appear this year, and a lot of other international reps. So that's more and more becoming a resource. European OSHA, Europe OSHA, just Google that. They have a great newsletter on, including, not exclusively on mental health, but including mental health and EAP issues. Dr. Dale Massey, formerly of the University of Maryland, just came out with a compendium of EAP activities. That compendium is available on Amazon. Just Google or go to Amazon and look for Dale Massey, M-A-S-I, for her latest book. And lastly, another free solid resource is Dr. Mark Attridge. He's sort of the preeminent researcher in the field, and all of his research and publications have been archived free to access at the University of Maryland School of Social Work archives. So, and again, just Google that and we can provide those contacts if necessary. Yeah. But all of those are great resources to measure the effectiveness, to compare your program against how others are doing.
And Mark was actually one of my guests a few months ago as well. So if anyone's interested, you can look back at that LinkedIn Live as well. It's on our LinkedIn and on our YouTube page as well. I can post a resource on that as well to flash back. Another one that you may want to have a look at if you're interested in just inclusivity and wellness at work in general. I spoke with Dr. Matthias Golob at the beginning of the year, where we talked about the importance of inclusivity and wellness programming, and why oftentimes one of the reasons for why wellness isn't as successful as we were hoping that they were going to be is oftentimes because we're not inclusive enough in our approaches to that. So that's another one that you might want to check out in my conversations. But for today, Dave, thank you so much for coming and sharing all your insights and experience around this. Much appreciated. This is our last LinkedIn Live for 2024, so we will be back in January for sure. So keep your eyes peeled for what's coming in January.
Pleasure, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.